welcome to episode 194 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is May 31st, and together with Robert and Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So today we continue our story with SAP and AI. Last week we had Trond on the show who talked about leveraging the Azure Center for SAP Solutions with AI services. When we look at our SAP customers, they are using the SAP Business Technology Platform with their SAP ECC or S/4HANA systems quite often. So today, Sanjeev Kumar joins us to talk about a scenario that he has built and published on GitHub, which integrates Azure OpenAI GPT-4 services with SAP Business Technology Platform. Welcome, Sanjeev, to our show here.
So thank you, Holger and Grant. Thank you.
Perfect. So before we dive into the topic and we will see the solution that you have published, can you maybe quickly introduce yourself? What do you do at Microsoft? What's your role at Microsoft?
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting to the podcast. My name is Sanjeev Kumar. I work as a cloud solution architect at Microsoft, right? So I'm based in Zurich, and primarily my role now involves basically technical architecture, design, deployment guidance to our customers, primarily in Switzerland, for basically topics related to AI and SAP, right? So just to kind of also talk a little bit, the AI topics now focus quite a lot on the Azure OpenAI services from Microsoft on Azure platform and associated ecosystem, which we will touch upon during the podcast. And then on the SAP topics, it is SAP RISE on Azure, SAP on Azure. And basically, it starts with the infrastructure discussions, and then it goes into architecture and deployment, and then also into extend and innovate scenarios for SAP. How to, once you have your systems on Azure, how do you make the best out of that, transition to Azure with AI, with data and associated scenarios. Yeah, so that's primarily that's my focus. And to find like reusable patterns, reusable solutions, and go back to customers with these ideas and help them to kind of speed up these deployments and transformations. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, we have interacted in the past quite a lot, and what I really love about working with you that you not only look at, I don't know, just this infrastructure piece. How can you help a customer? And there are some huge customers in Switzerland, right? I mean, we always think Switzerland is the small country, but actually some of our major SAP on Azure customers, or in general big SAP customers, they have their headquarters in Switzerland. So what I really love about your approach is always is that you not only look at the infrastructure piece, but really this bigger picture, and that's where we're now obviously with AI, with the data input, with all the integration scenarios. That's where it's always really fun to work with you and also to learn from you. I mean, you have built this. I think is the latest example of what you have built, but even before that, you had a lot of cool integration scenarios that you had developed. So now the focus is AI. And maybe before, or no, let's hand it over to you. Maybe you can quickly talk about what it actually is that you have developed, that you have published. So I just before the show, I again checked the GitHub repo. Everything is there. You have a beautiful instruction how to get started, so anyone can use it. But yeah, maybe over to you to kick this off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I also get a lot of inspiration from you, Holger, Goran, and Robert, and colleagues, because you guys are also working on quite the leading edge, technologies and solutions, at Microsoft in the SAP ecosystem. Give and take, yeah. And always inspirational to hear from you, right? So now what I can do is share some background to this, a solution and why it is important for our customers, and then, also walk through the solution. And that means I can share my slides, if that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so let me share my screen. And let me, sorry, go full screen
Yes.
on the PowerPoint.
Mhm.
And yep, just give me one moment. Let's move this. Okay. So please let me know if you can see it fine.
Yeah, works.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So the topic is a how to use SAP BTP platform along with the SAP with the SAP RISE and SAP on Azure ecosystem, complemented by now, of course, very popular and also transformational Microsoft AI platform, and particularly the Azure OpenAI services and associated ecosystem on Azure. So how to bring this together to kind of help our customers get the maximum value out of this set of complementary technologies and tools together, right? So you could be running SAP RISE on Azure or SAP on Azure, and then you want to transform your SAP processes and SAP areas of work in your company with generative AI, and then how can you complement the SAP BTP platform with the Microsoft AI platform on Azure, and with using solutions like prompt flow, right? So basically, these are the things we will talk about. And in our experience, and as we speak with the customers and partners, this can unlock a substantial value in the SAP ecosystem for our customers together. So how this all fits in together, so we can look at the foundation concept. So I think our customers are now very familiar with the Azure foundation layer or Azure core, the infrastructure, which, for instance, you can select a specific Azure region or multiple regions, and then you are going to run SAP on Azure or SAP S/4HANA on RISE on Azure. And that's the kind of the foundation on which you can build this stack, right? So this is the full stack. You can build it together. And then we have Azure OpenAI, different leading edge models. Also, we have a vast array of other solutions like Azure AI Search and so on in this ecosystem, as also shown here, for instance, Azure AI Search. So this comes in together, that in the same Azure region, you have the SAP systems on Azure, and then you have also the AI services on Azure, right? So basically, that comes in together, and then you can enable like chat with your SAP documents scenario already with this, and then you can also enable chat with your SAP data. So for instance, your sales, finance, and so on, that kind of data with connectivity and data integration with supported by SAP DataSphere, and then subsequently using AI skills and analytics on Microsoft Fabric. And this enables a comprehensive array of scenarios for chat with your data on SAP. And then also you can build comprehensive generative AI applications using the application logic, which you can build using our Microsoft open source prompt flow generative AI orchestration framework, right? So basically, or semantic kernel. So today's focus will be prompt flow, but also we have another framework, which is called semantic kernel. And then you can run this on SAP Cloud Foundry, BTP on Azure, or on the Cloud Foundry runtime, like Python runtime, or in the Chimera runtime with BTP on Azure, right? So now see, if you see this picture, the central construct is Azure region, and then you are running these different services, some from Microsoft, some from SAP, into one stack, and the benefits to the customer are better latency, faster performance. Also, you can improve the user experience, so the wait time for the end users is reduced, significantly, as these solutions are running in Microsoft region. And then also one important point is, like, you can govern these workloads in a unified fashion, right? So basically, you can have that kind of solid, governance layer and security, right? So basically, you can apply the reusable patterns and solutions to secure and govern these workloads on Azure.
That's actually also one thing that I would highlight, the security aspect of all of this. I mean, there are, if everything is really in your Azure subscription, there are a lot of things where I can lock down some of the services so that they don't have public endpoints, that I can really work with private endpoints in this whole setup. So to reduce the attack surface in some of these scenarios. Obviously, that's not possible everywhere, but for me, security is definitely one of these areas where I also see a huge value add in limiting the amount of or yeah, just running everything ideally on Azure in this specific case.
Absolutely. Also, the reuse of skills inside the customer
absolutely.
organization, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even the performance as well, because when you access the backend part from Azure to Azure, you know, the performance is much better than if you go through the public network, right, as well, in addition to this. Yeah.
Yes. And in the generative AI applications, the user experience is of paramount importance, right? So basically, it is directly adding the business value as the users get more satisfied, with the application performance, as you mentioned. So basically, that means the adoption curve for the generative AI applications could be faster, right, for our customers. Excellent. So with that, we can go a little bit deeper into the stack, and let's see how this translates into the components and solution layers. So certainly, then you have the SAP workloads in Azure, your mission critical systems on Azure, and then basically you have now options as you also pointed to in let's say many different parts in the world, on Azure regions you can run SAP BTP platform in Azure, and then you have a framework which is also very useful for, if you imagine like you need to get the user input, you need to do some processing of that user input as a question in the chat, for instance, and you may need to have your business logic. For instance, you need to talk to SAP ABAP layer, right, over the OData services, or if you need to, for instance, talk to SAP, basically CDS views, right, using different connection layers, right, and likewise you may have your SAP content in your content management systems, and you need to talk to these documents, right? So you need to build this logic, and you need to find an easy way and a productive way to build this logic, and that needs orchestration or wiring of these different components. And eventually you need to call the large language model like GPT 3.5 or GPT-4. And this needs like a framework, which is what is called prompt flow, right? So as the name says, like prompt flow, which means you can create a variety of prompts, you can test those out, you can build these, flows, right, or the steps, and then you can deploy this framework, together, with the logic on SAP BTP platform on Azure, right? And I prepared a kind of an example how you can easily, do a sample application, like this. And this is available on GitHub, and certainly, happy to explain if you have any questions. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Maybe let's really take a look. I think, I mean, when you are working with Azure AI, and for example, that was also what we had last week with Trond there. Working with prompt flow comes naturally because this is really deeply embedded in how you work with the Azure AI Studio, for example. But I think especially when you come from the SAP world, when you come from BTP, then there are a lot of different frameworks. There are a lot of solutions out there that can help you to streamline, to align these different processes, the different steps that you need to do to create an AI-related scenario. So I think it's good to maybe really take a look of what you can do with this, and then I'm sure we'll have some more questions.
Absolutely. So very quick. So these are the steps to deploy your first prompt flow application on SAP BTP on Azure. So you need to do some preparation work on the BTP with sub accounts, and you need to provision Cloud Foundry runtime, and then you can adapt this template from the GitHub repository. You can change it as per your requirements, and then you can deploy this application on SAP BTP on Azure. And this application will contain the prompt flow framework. So it can be packaged inside this Python kind of application, and this Python application gets deployed onto SAP BTP, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. So then I will now stop sharing my screen and go into the demo system, if that's okay.
Yeah, and maybe we can also quickly start with the GitHub repo then. So if you're going to share your screen, because I think sometimes it always looks complicated. Oh, how do I get started? But I think actually if we take a look at the repo, it's really nice. You have very well documented the steps that need to be done to get this thing started, and it is fairly easy to get started actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me do that. And I will reshare my screen. Okay, and let me open the GitHub repo. Yep. All right, so I will now reshare, and I'm on a remote system, so but that's all good. Okay, so a moment. Yeah, so now you should be able to see.
Yes, now we see
screen,
the GitHub repo. Yes.
GitHub repo. Yeah. So in this GitHub repo, the main file is essentially, first of all, those of the audience who would be familiar with the BTP a little bit, or even if you are not, no problem. So basically, we need to tell BTP, what is our application through the manifest, right? So basically, we give it a name like prompt flow chat app. Of course, you give the name you need to, and then there is a little bit of information about the memory requirements and where is our kind of the baseline code, and then which build pack are we needing from the BTP, right? And then what is the starting point, or entry point for our BTP application. So that's the Python server.py. So basically, that's the first thing you need to prepare to publish this application on BTP, right? Rest of the work is actually done by prompt flow. So, for instance, our application is basically building a connection to Azure OpenAI, as you can see, right? So we are using the large language models like GPT 3.5 or GPT-4 from Azure OpenAI for these examples. And we are configuring some environment variables in BTP. And those are the ones which we are using to build a connection to Azure OpenAI, which is running on Azure in a specific region, for instance. And then eventually, this is a Flask application. So many of you may be familiar that this is like a web application framework for Python. And hence, this is quite extensible. So you can think like, either you can treat like a microservice pattern where you can say, okay, I can do my backend component like this in the and expose as a REST endpoint, or I can do a front-end microservice separate from the backend, right? And these are the options possible here, and you can build it like a Flask application, assign it a particular port, and then BTP will publish this as an endpoint. Now the other thing we are doing is like enabling chat history. So because this is like you can imagine we are building like with this example we're building like a tiny bit of Chat GPT API on BTP with Microsoft Azure OpenAI and Microsoft Prompt Flow, right? So then we are publishing a route from our chat API, so /chat, and then we are defining a function which is basically getting the user question, taking the chat history and embedding into the prompt, right? So basically we want to supply the user question in the prompt and the chat history in the prompt. As you can see, the append is happening here, and then we are basically invoking the large language model and getting the response from the LLM. And then basically we are doing the app.run. Yeah, so this is the main kind of the invocation which tells BTP to run this in the Python build pack and run this entire code, right? Now, the important thing is, you can treat this little bit like a boilerplate code, which you can always reuse from here. And rest of the work, which is in many different files, is actually done for you by Microsoft Prompt Flow, right? So here, I will walk you through how it looks first visually, and then I will show you how you can do this through the DevOps process, right? And then how do you publish this kind of application on BTP? I will walk you through also, basically step by step. But do you have any questions, at this moment?
No, I think for me, one of the highlights when I looked at the code was how comparable little code is there, is required to get this working. Exactly here, the server Python file, for example, how little information is required to get this running, to get this working, and then how easy it actually is then to enhance this scenario going forward. So yeah, no further questions from my side yet.
Okay, got you. So let's look at how this looks like, first of all, in a little bit of visual builder, if you like to call, and then we can. So we have essentially, those of you who are seeing it probably first time, this is our Azure AI Studio, which went to GA in Microsoft Build just I think 1 week or 2 weeks back, right? Yeah. And this is a comprehensive solution to manage the large language model deployment, like GPT-4 and GPT 3.5. So I've used interchangeably both of these models basically, and then you can build kind of on your data scenario. So you can configure all sorts of kind of data over here, and then you can also test it out with our build your on your data or on your documents scenario with our chat playground, right? So there are a lot of options it opens up for you, but our focus today is the prompt flow, which is one of the kind of components of our AI Studio. And here you can create a prompt flow. So for instance, I created this one for our demo. And the concept here is that you collect some inputs from the end user, like we are getting like the question from the user, and then we also include the chat history, the similar concept which we spoke just a minute back. And then you can produce the output back to the user. So for instance, we are producing the answer, which is the chat.output, which we're giving to the user, right? The flexibility here, which is very important, is that you can put your own UI, or the end user layer at the top of it. So you can treat this like a backend, and then you can use like Teams as the interface, or you can use your web UI or chat UI and treat this as like
map it to the existing backend.
Yeah, okay. To the existing backend, cool. Because this exposes the APIs, as REST endpoints, right? And there's a complete, monitoring and governance layer which is available as part of prompt flow, right? And then in BTP case, you can do a part of this in BTP, as well, basically, right? So now going through that, so the concept here is inputs and outputs, and then the concept is something called nodes. So for instance, this item which I'm showing you is a node. This node could be of many different types. So it could be a large language model, it could be a prompt, it could be a Python code block, right? It could be many other tools which we enable, right? So imagine you have a scenario in mind, and you are kind of thinking, hey, how do I go about building this scenario, right? So you can click and drop, from here the nodes, and you can build, one by one, a flow, right? So get this input, pass this input to this next node. For instance, I'm passing this, here a little bit into the like inputs.chat.history and inputs.question, right? So you can imagine this is like wiring the things together, right? And then you can test it. This is the whole purpose, that you can test it iteratively and get to the better output with each iteration. You can also test like different kinds of prompts. For instance, currently we have used like a prompt which is like very simple. You are a helpful assistant. But you could imagine like you can give the prompts like you are SAP procurement, expert, right? And you can answer questions related to, basically the data, from SAP Ariba, for instance. And then you can integrate Ariba APIs here, right? So it opens like those possibilities. And then of course, we can pass the user question. And visually, this is how it will look like. Exactly as the name says, it looks like a flow with basically, sorry, this one. Yeah, so basically, so this is visually, it is looking like this kind of view, which you can zoom in, etc. But essentially, inputs are coming to this node. I kept it, intentionally very simple for the demo so that people can see that, how you can also make sense of the flow, right? So basically, inputs, the nodes, and the outputs. And you can make very large flows, very complex flows, so you can evolve from here, right? So this is the concept. And then when you are ready to test it, you can connect it to your model deployment. Like I used like GPT-35 Turbo in this example. You can use GPT-4. You can set up like the model temperature, etc. And then you're ready to test it. You can test it here itself, like technical testing here. For instance, I would invoke here. It takes a little bit of time to bootstrap, to warm up the compute, because also there is a very nice option here to let the compute go to sleep, if you're not using it, right? So to save the cost, right? So as you will see that it will now invoke the large language model and start populating gradually the outputs, over here, basically, right? So, and there's a complete debugging, tracing, logging ability, available here. And that makes the development process also very very nice, right? So you can see the output now. So I just asked the question like, tell me about SAP BTP and Azure, and then it produces the output. So now this is quite, let's say, technical in this sense, right? But it is also possible to have the conversations with business colleagues, because we can show them the flow, right?
Absolutely.
We can show what it does and how it does. It's more transparent, right? It's not only the code. Yeah.
Exactly. And Sanjeev, I mean, I've done a lot of work in the meantime with Copilot Studio, for example. And what I really loved there was always this, it's very easy to understand the flow. You ask a question, you have these different actions, and you do have some call outs, you have some generative AI functionalities in there. And that's what I really loved, or still love about Copilot Studio. It's really this low code tool. I was actually always thinking it would make sense to really also help the pro dev developer that really uses Azure AI Studio and stuff like that, that really does hard code AI development, because having this flow really helps. I mean, even if you like, and there's also a raw file mode where you can really see what's actually happening. But sometimes it is really useful to have a graphical representation, to have, okay, these are things that you have maybe some branches, depending on the answer, where you maybe collect additional information. And here you have this very easy to use flow to get started, while still having full access to the actual code, which obviously is not the case with Copilot Studio. Copilot Studio abstracts a lot of low-level things, and it does not allow you to go very deep. But here, you have on the one hand the beautiful graphical representation of the flow. It's very easy to add additional elements, but you still have the full power, the full control to go in the code and do whatever modification or enhancements are really, really required for your specific scenario.
Absolutely. And if we enable the raw file mode for a moment, as you can see that now the entire code is basically here visible, right? So you can go to any file, you can do the edits here, and that's what I've seen customers doing. So they do iterations of the prompt, variants, for instance, as you mentioned. You can iterate on the code itself, and then just test run. Just you can either click on the chat here, or run, as I was showing, run the node basically, or the flow, the entire flow, or you can deploy it quickly, here and test it out. So this allows faster iteration. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I guess, Sanjay, it should be easy to test it and switch it between the different ChatGPT version, as an example.
Yes.
So then you see, okay, it's the same stuff, but then you say, okay, I want the old one and the new one, and then see the difference, right?
Absolutely. So you can build the connections to these different model, variants and model versions, right? And model releases and test out the impact,
In
Also,
an
you can
easy
tweak
way.
in an easy way. You can tweak the system prompt. You can give it a different personality or different, markdown, or change the user prompt, give it instructions, don't do this or do this, and test it out quickly, right?
Yeah.
So it enables the agile development. That's how our customers see it, that this enables the agile development. And particularly for our SAP customers, this could be also quite useful, that you have, chat with your SAP data scenario and you want to quickly build, some, useful prompts, which are reflecting the persona of the target audience, like the sales colleagues, or the finance colleagues, right? And this is something which can be also very helpful. Very quickly on the code-based approach. So just want to build a little bit of background to the code-based approach. Then I will show you how, I have transferred this, exactly this code into VS Code, right? So, so for instance, the central file is always, as you know, it's a kind of a graph kind of system, or directed acyclic graph, which is DAG, So the flow file is, always same thing, inputs, outputs, and then the nodes, and then the parameters for the nodes, basically, right? So this is the central file, right? So basically, and then you can link your code to this in this central file as the nodes, so you can give input to the node, you can get the outputs, and sequence these things, right? So what I did, I took out the code from here using this, download option, because from here onwards, we can go into CI/CD and DevOps approach.
Yeah.
Right? As you hear these days, there's also a very important paradigm called LLM ops, right? Or large language model ops. And our prompt flow solution enables the LLM ops, right? And this fits in very nicely with the BTP platform, right? So you can use CI/CD services from there. You can use the runtime, from there, and you can establish like LLM ops between Microsoft AI platform and the SAP BTP platform, right? And then, data on SAP S/4HANA system, right? So let's quickly see how it looks like in VS Code. So let me just prepare the screen a little bit. And this is exactly the same code which I downloaded, and made available over here. And as you can see now, also, by the way, I enabled GitHub Copilot.
I was just going to say, yes. Yeah.
So it makes my development process much faster, right? So basically, I can't appreciate it enough, right? It really helps me save time, right? So
yeah.
So this is the flow.dag.yaml, and that's the server.py file, basically, which we were looking at on the GitHub repo. So in this case, what I did, I adapted my prompt flow a little bit in the prompt flow, and then just downloaded the source code here and put in here, and then I put in basically, I started preparing this for the BTP deployment, right? So I prepared my manifest file, and then basically I also have some CF ignore, which so for instance, I don't want to get some data, into repo, etc., and also not into the runtime. So that's what I prepared. So maybe quickly, if we try to do this. So the important thing is that prompt flow comes with a full CLI, right? So it's a very developer-friendly tool as well. And you can use the CLI to test, for instance. So for instance, I can test this flow.
Yeah.
And I give them default prompt, and it will. So for instance, I did a test run, and I get the answer. So I can kind of make sense of, okay, it's going in the right direction, right? And then I can also serve the flow just for, basically further testing on the UI. So for instance, let me try this. And this opens a kind of pre-built UI, right? Which is something, So for instance,
But this is running what I see in your local environment, localhost.
Yes.
Okay. For now, meaning you could test it separately, so to say, prior to deploying to cloud. Okay.
Absolutely.
But you still call out to Azure OpenAI public endpoints.
Yes.
So this cannot completely run local. It still needs the connection to the Azure AI services.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you will need to connect to like SAP, data sources, Azure OpenAI, Azure AI Search, Azure Document Intelligence, depending on what you are trying to build. and prompt flow, enables all of these scenarios, right? So for instance, this is an easy way to test that, hey, the chat behavior, how will this feel like, right? Like in a real world. And then basically, our application is, prepared, and I do a quick check, okay, now this is my Flask application, and, that means I need now to also go to, BTP, runtime in a moment and see, how my application will look like there. But what do I need to do for that? So, I have already this application, running. So I will just try to show you with another example. So now I have another application, prompt flow chat app 2, right?
Yeah.
And now we will, since I logged into BTP already for our demo, so I can just do CF push, right?
Yeah.
And that should take my basically the source code. It should honor my CF ignore and my manifest YAML, and it should push my application to BTP Cloud Foundry runtime with Python build pack.
So basically, you have already before authenticated against your BTP instance, CF login, and all these different things. You have selected the sub account that you're working on BTP, and since you have done this already beforehand, you can just do a CF push now. It takes the information from the manifest, and now it publishes this application on your BTP sub account.
Absolutely. I do some additional steps as well, like I set up, my environment variables, right?
Yeah.
So as a customer, you have to
with the
also
API key.
With the API keys, and you have to, basically have a design for that, right? Like how to securely make those, basically, variables available to the application. So I do that a little bit of extra step, and then I just issue like CF restage my application, right? So, and then done. Then the application is available, right, for basically, for the testing, right? Of course, you will set up a proper environment, basically, which is like dev, test, PRD. So all of that you need to do, right? And that's why this approach is so, useful, that you can set up a full CI/CD, full DevOps process with this, right?
Yeah.
So there'll be some warnings, etc. But and after some minutes, it'll deploy. But we can see already an existing deployed application, and so for instance, this is the one which I already have, but you'll see, I think, coming up the other one also, unless my login has timed out.
I mean, now you're in the BTP cockpit.
Now I'm in the BTP cockpit.
Your specific sub account on BTP, and that's the application that you have previously deployed. And absolutely. So hopefully in a second or so we would see the app 2 that you just changed in the manifest, that this should also show up here.
Yes. So maybe I can just refresh my page. So so absolutely. So it basically uses the build pack which I instructed in the manifest YAML. It prepares the requirement for the compute basically, and then shortly it shows up the application coming up here, right? So the app 2 is coming here, and of course then it's a kind of a BTP application, so you can do all the BTP application functionality on this. And then since I published this as a Flask REST endpoint, so we can also test, for instance, this one which I prepared earlier in the Postman client, for instance, right? So that's the application, let's say endpoint, CF apps,
nice.
AP21 HANA on demand.com, on BTP. And that's the URI, like /chat. That's the URI we expose in the Flask application. And then I'm simply taking a query string, but of course, in the actual application, you will do a post body and so on. And then basically we can say, okay, tell me benefits of SAP BTP on Azure. And then you can send this question. So in a moment, you will get an answer. An important thing is that the chat history, is enabled as well, right? So I wanted to leave the UI to our audience that they can design their on the UI. Right?
A nice
They
Fiori
can create,
application or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do Teams, you can do other UI, Node.js, Python Flask application, etc. And basically, so for instance, I can say, tell me.
This is what
yes.
we mentioned. It's good.
Yeah.
Just looking.
And now I said, tell me more about it. So ideally, it should remember, okay, what is it? Because that comes from the chat history, and that's the behavior which makes this remarkably easy for the end users, right? And then you can say, okay, now show this in JSON format, right? So basically, show this in JSON format. I mean, some of these things I'm trying just here,
testing
but
on
I
the
think
fly.
Yeah, on the fly. So, but ideally now see how easy this could be for the developers, right? So you can imagine the flexibility. For instance, now this is in JSON format, right? You can consume this like a real API, and so you can. So how this enables you as a SAP developer and SAP business, analyst and SAP functional, expert, is you can think like, what business problems I need to solve, when SAP data and SAP documents, SAP content is at the center, right, of this, how do I imagine this? How do I visualize this use case? How do I think about it? And then I can prototype it quickly using prompt flow. And then I can deploy it to BTP.
Jump here. I mean, I'm really impressed with this. Show me in a JSON format, and you use the same API call. Basically, you didn't design the API call to return you the JSON result, actually, but you ask the ChatGPT to return you through that the same API results in a JSON format. So, okay, wow, because generally you have to do it if you would do it. I mean, when you design an API, you have to think in advance. But here, it's not. The AI, it's doing this for you through the same API.
Absolutely.
This is
and
quite
remembering
nice.
the context. So
and
it really
remembering
provides
the context,
the information on the benefits of BTP on Azure. And it returns the results in JSON. Yeah, it's really cool.
That's enable you to further easily consume it for whatever purpose in workflow and whatever you would love to do it. Okay.
Yeah, and one highlight is like, if we just go back to the original point. Now imagine how many different parts are in this, right? So basically, and you need all of these, right? You need acceleration, agile development, right? You need a DevOps process. You need to, have a BTP strategy. You need to have an Azure strategy, right? Basically, AI strategy, right? And how you can bring these parts together in one governance plane, one security plane, as you mentioned earlier as well, and one data plane together, right? So you have S/4HANA system on Azure, BTP on Azure, and the Microsoft AI stack, on Azure, right? And this you can combine together, right? So basically, and you can take control of latency, performance, governance, security. So that's what, could be also very useful for our customers.
No, this is really, really cool. And really this whole end-to-end story where you can easily start building the prompt flow in Azure AI Studio, and then publishing it all via, as you said, via pipelines potentially, so that it ends up in BTP. And then now we have an endpoint, and this is actually really, really cool. So now a native BTP developer could take over and say, look, or maybe a beautiful an SAP Fiori UI5 developer could take over and say, look, now I'll build a really cool UI5 application on top of this, and I don't care about the logic behind anymore. I just call the endpoint. I just call the REST endpoint that is now exposed via BTP. So this is actually a really nice scenario.
Yeah.
So the cool thing is, as we started, everything is available on GitHub, on your GitHub repo. So we'll put the link to the GitHub repo in the show notes. Everyone can easily get started. You have outlined all the steps. We looked at the skeleton, or not only actually at the skeleton, but at the getting started thing. The only thing obviously that you need is an Azure OpenAI subscription. You need an Azure OpenAI key to access the service, but then it's just a CF push to get the solution into your BTP environment. Oh yeah, and obviously you need BTP, but there you can also use BTP trial. I guess it's also working with BTP trial, right?
It
Because you're
is.
just
I'm using
publishing
BTP trial, for instance.
Okay,
for this
there
one.
you go. Yeah. So this is also really easy then to get started. Cool. Well, Sanjeev, I think that was fantastic. That was a really, really nice scenario. I hope a lot of our listeners, viewers, will give it a try. I think this is a really nice point to get started, to play around also on BTP with AI services. So thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to the next interaction when we have you back on the show to talk maybe about the next evolution of BTP, RISE, and AI in this context.
Thanks a lot, Holger and Goran. Absolutely a great discussion, and hopefully this will help our audience. And yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.